At 6:30 p.m., the kitchen clock blinked like a lighthouse I no longer needed. That was Daniel's time. Keys, kiss, flowers on the counter, a line about traffic, the soft thud of polished shoes under the bench. Tonight the hallway stayed silent, smelling faintly of lilies from yesterday's memorial. I stood there with my hand on the back of his chair, as if I could keep the room from tipping. We were 18 years married. The kind people call a model couple, polished by time and routine. He paid the bills, I kept the home alive. He never forgot flowers on Fridays, tulips in spring, dahlias when summer tired out, white roses when he felt sorry for staying late. Grief makes even the good memories suspicious. Who were those flowers for me, or the story he liked to tell about us? At the service, strangers hugged me with careful arms. They told me how generous he was, how capable, how he took care of things like a man who made problems disappear. Their compliments landed like feathers that somehow bruised. Monica, steady Monica, held me upright with a hand at the small of my back, counting my breaths when I forgot to do it myself. She didn't ask for anything, just kept her voice low and warm. Drink some water. Sit when you need to. I leaned on that voice like a railing on a dark staircase. Then Jenna arrived. My little sister walked in late, in a dress the color of wet asphalt, smelling like citrus and something expensive. Her hug lasted a shade too long, cheek pressed, fingers locking behind my neck, like she needed the pose more than the comfort. She whispered, "You were everything to him," then pulled back and studied my face the way people study a mirror. I told myself she was being tender. I wanted that to be true. Night fell hard. After the last casserole was squared into the fridge and the last well-wisher waved from the curb, the house shrank to the kitchen light and a humming dishwasher. Monica stacked plates, stubborn about staying. Jenna poured herself a drink, as if she lived here, 2 fingers of bourbon, clink of ice, no apology. The glass looked heavy in her hand. She ran her finger along the counter and said, bright as a cashier, "He fronted me some money a while back. Short term. He said you'd know." I blinked. The word fronted didn't fit Daniel's mouth in my memory. He was a planner, a ledger man, the kind who used words like allocate and project. "What money?" I asked. Calm on the surface, small storm underneath. She smiled into the glass. "Don't worry," she said. "It wasn't much for him. You're taken care of now, so that phrase snagged. Taken care of. Like I'd become an account to be closed." Monica stilled, plate in midair. I heard the old clock in the living room pick up its pace, tick-tick louder than before. "Jenna," I said, "what arrangement are you talking about?" I kept my voice flat, the way nurses ask about pain. It felt safer than anger. She made a little fuss about the exact number, a shrug that tried too hard to be casual. "He said not to bother you," she added, "but since things are settled." Her eyes swept the kitchen, lingering on the vase of lilies, the sympathy cards soldiered along the window. She was inventorying my grief. Monica placed the plate down as if it might break the floor. "This isn't the moment," she murmured. She was right. And yet the moment had chosen me. Something in my chest changed shape, a quiet click like a lock deciding what it wants. I remembered all the times I'd asked simple questions and accepted charming answers. The storage key he joked about, a messy, boring place, he'd said, years ago. The Friday flowers. The weekends away that got new names, conference, client, emergency. Grief rearranges your furniture, suspicion switches the labels on the drawers. Jenna leaned on the island and let the silence work. "We can square it now or later," she said, softer, as if kindness were a payment plan. "Whatever's easiest for you." She sipped. The ice chimed. I looked at her and saw not my sister, but a woman reading a script I hadn't been given. The kitchen light was too bright on her skin, turning her perfume into a sweet chemical fog. "I never heard about any loan," I said. "There won't be any squaring tonight." She feigned offense, then gentled her mouth. "Of course," she said, and set down the glass without finishing it. She hugged me again, shorter this time, efficient, and left with the kind of smile people wear after winning something small but certain. The door shut. The dishwasher sighed. The lilies leaned toward the sink like exhausted dancers. Monica touched my shoulder. "Do you want me to stay?" Her voice made a bridge I could walk across if I chose. I nodded, then shook my head, then nodded again, because choosing felt like picking a story and I no longer trusted mine. We made tea we didn't drink. We listened to the house cope. When I finally went upstairs, the bed looked like a stage set. Perfect pillows, perfect fold, no evidence of real sleep. I stood there with the funeral program in my hand and read his name again, as if ink could confirm death. Daniel Miller. Loving husband. Devoted. Reliable. The words held, but their edges went soft. What kind of grief asks you to repay a debt you never knew existed? I turned off the light and lay down, wide awake beside a ghost. Somewhere between the second and third hour, the answer began to pulse in the dark, the kind that hides inside a key you were told not to bother with. I didn't sleep. The house breathed in thin little sounds, the fridge, the pipes, the wind grazing the siding like a stranger's sleeve. I walked it like a museum after hours, touching frames and chair backs, testing what still felt real. The flowers on the table smelled too clean, as if grief had been disinfected. On the hallway console, a dish waited with spare receipts and old coins. His keyring lay there, heavier than memory. House, car, office, gym, familiar teeth. Then the odd one, a blunt, sawtooth blade with a square bow and a stamped code I didn't recognize. I remembered his joke years ago, said with that easy shrug, just a messy storage space. You'd be bored. He'd kiss my hair and change the subject. I had let him. The thought slid under my ribs and lodged there. How many rooms in my life were labeled boring so I wouldn't open the door? I lifted the key and felt that old, stubborn tremor in my hand quiet itself, like it wanted a job. There was a brittle plastic tag on the ring, fogged by time, with a number and a street I knew by feel, down by the waterfront where gulls scream over rust and the wind tastes like pennies. I tried to sleep after that. I lay down and counted the dark between streetlights. At 5, I gave up. I showered, pulled on jeans and a sweater, and tied my hair back like I was clocking in. Monica texted a small sun emoji at 6:02 a.m. I wrote back, I'm okay. It was half true. Sometimes you say the thing you want and see if your life obeys. The sky over Norfolk went from bruised to frost glass as I drove east. Warehouses hunched along cracked pavement, paint peeled in long curls, chain-link fences clutched at weeds. A stray cat crossed slow as if time didn't apply to it. The lot held a low run of concrete units, the kind of place where businesses store leftovers and mistakes. The salt wind knifed through my sweater. I found the number from the tag painted above a roll-up door, Bay 14C. The lock fit the key like a mouth that knew the teeth. A single turn. The shiver of old tumblers agreeing. The metal door rasped upward, coughing dust. I expected chaos, camping gear, old files, the heavy junk marriages accumulate. Instead, the air came out cool and deliberate, carrying the papery smell of toner and the tin scent of staples. A switch near the frame clicked. Fluorescent light flooded the bay, clean and unforgiving. It wasn't a storage unit. It was a room that planned things. Every wall had been skinned with cork panels and gridboards. Photos printed on matte paper. News clippings trimmed square. Maps with highways veined in red pencil. Index cards pressed under clear pushpins, each with a date and 2 or 3 words that meant everything to someone. Cabin, winter, horizon checkup, H4 receipt. Twine lines connected corners like veins. Not art. Arteries. A folding table sat dead center, not cheap, not permanent, chosen because it could be carried away. On it, rows of plastic file bins with neat labels, a stapler aligned with a tape dispenser, pens arranged by color and thickness. A portable printer blinked a ready light. An old-fashioned landline. No chair. You didn't sit in here. You executed and left. I stepped in with careful feet, afraid to jostle the logic. The concrete floor kept a faint chill, even under rubber mats laid in pragmatic squares. There was a calendar taped to the far wall, dates crossed in tidy black, notations coded in green and blue. Fridays were marked with small flower stickers. For me? For the story of me? My throat tightened, then eased. I breathed through my nose and tasted dust. On the left wall, a cluster of photos drew the eye, Not because they were larger, but because they were happy. Daniel smiled in those shots with his face unbuttoned, shoulders low, hands not performing. He wore jeans I'd never seen and a flannel he would have called a joke at home. Beaches, woods, a porch with string lights. Same restaurants I never visited. I didn't move closer yet. I made myself a witness to the room before I let the room witness me. Evidence folders lined a low shelf. Their edges had the clean, squared look of recent use. I opened one at random and found receipts from hardware stores, cash withdrawals, handwritten columns that weren't for taxes. Another folder held photocopies of driver's licenses and something like a ship schedule. I closed it and rested my palms on the table. My heartbeat felt too loud for fluorescent light. What kind of life needs a war room? The answer tried to whisper its shape, but I wasn't ready. I walked the perimeter instead, reading without understanding, letting pattern nibble at me. A map of the Outer Banks marked with tiny XS where only locals go. A strip of Polaroids hung in a line, beach fire, sparklers, 3 shadows taller than the people who cast them. In the corner, a small safe hid under a moving blanket, disguised badly, like a lie wearing yesterday's shirt. I turned back to the photos I'd avoided. My feet stopped at the edge of a taped rectangle on the floor, like a stage mark for an actor who never missed his line. I leaned in. Daniel was laughing. The kind that lifts the eyes and erases 10 years. His head was tipped toward a woman in a dark jacket. Her face was turned 3/4 away, hair blown across her cheek by wind I could nearly hear. In another shot, a young man reached for a bottle of soda, his hand blurred by motion, his mouth open mid-story. I didn't know them. I knew that joy. The clock in my pocket, my phone, vibrated once and went still. I ignored it. My fingers hovered over a caption written in his precise block letters, and the date that would mean something if I allowed it. The floor felt a degree colder. The fluorescent hum seemed to rise like insects. I told myself I would look for 10 seconds. Just enough to steady the year in my mind. Just enough to confirm what my heart already knew how to fear. Would you have looked longer? I reached for the top photo, and the room, the whole careful room, looked back. I made myself look. 10 seconds became a minute. Then 2. The woman showed up again and again, dark hair, sharp features, a smile that didn't apologize for taking space. Naomi. The name was handwritten on the back of a photo with a date I knew too well. Late summer, last year. Daniel had called from a client dinner and promised he'd be home by noon. In the picture, he was barefoot on a deck, sleeves rolled, holding a skewer of shrimp with the loose confidence he never wore around me. A young man threaded through the scenes like a constant. Early 30s, quick grin, eyes that scanned before they landed. Ethan. He leaned into Daniel the way sons lean into fathers who make room for them. Beach fires, mountain cabins, greasy diner breakfasts with sunlight bleaching the table. I tried to hate the joy and failed. That failure hurt more than anger ever could. Captions mapped a decade. Asheville. Hatteras. Mendocino. A winter cabin with fog on the glass and 3 mugs steaming in a row. The careful handwriting told a story I was never invited to read. He had curated a parallel life with the patience of a librarian. He didn't forget flowers, he archived himself. I turned to the table. Folders waited with their quiet teeth. Bank statements first, accounts I'd never seen, recurring transfers to names that felt made up on purpose. Tide Something LLC. Northbridge Holdings. Passive words to hide active choices. Then filings clean, almost pretty. Numbers that fit together too smoothly, like lies that had practiced. I found courier receipts, a prepaid phone bill, and a list of post office boxes spread across 3 states. My breath shortened, shallow and small. I flipped a tab labeled tax, his block letters precise. Inside sat returns for entities that didn't exist in our kitchen conversations. Schedule K ones I had never heard of. Depreciation tables for equipment nobody owned. He had built an architecture you could live inside without seeing its bones. How many times had I dusted the surface of that house? Under the stack, a thin medical folder waited, beige and smug. Horizon Cardiac Center. My fingers hesitated on the clasp, then pulled. The report was direct the way doctors learn to be. Severe cardiomyopathy. Advanced disease. High risk of sudden failure without intervention. Date: less than 3 months before he collapsed on our bathroom floor, and I screamed his name into the quiet. I read the next line twice. Patient advised to reduce stress, inform family, and avoid strenuous travel. The words blurred and came back. He had known. He knew his heart was a ticking thing. He still chose the trips, the cabins, the deck with string lights. He still chose secrets over confession. Was I a sanctuary, or just the alibi that made everything else possible? I pressed the report to the table and tried to inventory my own body. Hands cold. Jaw clenched. A pulse in my neck like a small hammer. The fluorescent lights hummed, merciless and white. The calendar on the wall flashed its stickers, flowers on Fridays. For me. For the legend of me. Grief bent into a new shape, clarity wearing a mask that still smelled like lilies. I found a dated photo from the week of his diagnosis. He stood with Naomi outside a clinic door, a prescription bag folded into his fist. Ethan's arm looped around his shoulder like a seatbelt. Daniel's smile didn't reach his eyes. He had not told me. He had driven home with bakery roses and a story about a late meeting. I put the picture down before it cut. A small metal box hid under the printer. Inside, a flash of jewelry, nothing dramatic. A thumb-sized emerald caught the light and threw it back in a disciplined shard. A note beneath it, for A, wear this. The handwriting was his, but the tone was different, as if instruction had replaced affection. My stomach tightened. Why instruct me to wear a gift? I sat on the edge of the table with my knees not quite touching the floor. The room had a heartbeat now, and it wasn't mine. Each file opened another inch of distance between the marriage I lived and the life he built. I thought of Jenna's loan, of the perfume at the memorial, of the way strangers called him capable like it was a compliment and not a warning. What do you do when the map of your life redraws itself in front of you? Do you cling to the old borders or learn the new roads? Would you have done the same? Something scraped outside, rubber on concrete, a careful foot. The sound paused, then came closer. A shadow cut the bottom inch of light under the roll-up door and held there, listening back. I closed the medical folder and set it down without a sound. The landline on the table stared up at me like it knew a number I didn't. I wasn't alone in the room that planned things. The footsteps stopped just outside the roll-up door. Not the careless shuffle of a thief, but the careful pause of someone who didn't want to startle the room. A knuckle tapped the metal twice, polite. I froze with one hand on the table and the other near the emerald in its small velvet box. Andrea? A man's voice, steady, younger than I expected. If you're there. I'm Ethan. The name landed like a key thrown across a table. I lifted the door halfway. The young man from the photos stood in the gray morning light, jacket zipped, eyes scanning the edges before they settled on me. He looked like someone who repaired things for a living: wires, code, people's bad decisions. He kept his hands visible. Good instinct. I know who you are, I said, and heard the tired steel in my voice. It surprised us both. He nodded once. No smile. I waited a week, he said. I figured you'd find this place after the memorial. He would have wanted you to. Would you have trusted him? I didn't. Not yet. I opened the door the rest of the way and stepped back. He entered with the respect of a guest and the familiarity of a son who knew where the light switch lived. He glanced at the wall of photos and exhaled through his nose. Not quite a laugh, not quite grief. He kept us separate, Ethan said, looking at the string of beach shots. He always said it was safer that way. Especially when my mom was alive. The verb hit sideways. Was. I let it pass, because there were too many fires to count and I only had 2 hands. He reached into his jacket and unfolded a document held closed with a paper clip. There's a draft, he said. A few weeks before it happened. It mentions me. He didn't push it at me, he set it on the table like evidence handled by chain of custody. The draft will carry Daniel's neat block letters on the tabs and a notary stamp that looked too permanent for a man who loved exits. Names I knew and did not know populated the paragraphs. One line caught like a fishhook: Orion Global Logistics, assets and records to be distributed as directed by executor. See attached memorandum. I turned the page. The memorandum wasn't attached. Ethan produced a second sheet, just a folded note with a single line in Daniel's handwriting. Further documents in office vault. Access linked to a personal item given to A. I waited for the blood to move through me. The room hummed. On the table beside my hand sat the velvet box with the emerald inside, light trapped in green like a bottled storm. He had told me to wear it. He had never told me why. Ethan watched my eyes find the box. He didn't reach for it. He said you'd recognize it, he added quietly. That it would make sense when you needed it to. I don't like riddles, I said, though part of me did. Riddles are just truths in slower clothes. He gave a small shrug. Daniel liked control. The first time he used the first name, not father. It sharpened the air. We stood in that fluorescent light and took inventory of a dead man's design. I asked Ethan how long he'd known about me. He said, always, like it was the easiest fact in the room. He told me Daniel kept calendars for both lives and never let the circles overlap. Ethan had eaten burgers on Tuesdays when I had pasta on Wednesdays. My husband had engineered an alibi and installed himself inside it. I read more of the draft. Ethan named as heir. A trust referenced but not defined. An executor's discretion that smelled like a trap disguised as a gift. A separate letter to be delivered in person if Andrea and Ethan meet, like a final exam with proctors. Where's the office vault? I asked. Downtown, he said. The glass building with the desert art in the lobby. He called it a satellite office. He smiled without warmth. Orbit humor. I looked back to the line, access linked to a personal item given to A. The emerald felt heavier just sitting there. I picked up the box, flipped the lid, and held the pendant to the light. No inscription. A clean clasp. No obvious trick. But the weight told a story, too dense for a stone that size, as if something small and hard slept inside. I didn't test it. Not yet. Instinct said the room was for observation, not action. Instinct also said that once I broke the first seal, I wouldn't get to choose the pace again. Ethan set a small flash drive on the table and pulled it back before I could reach. Not this, he said. Not yet. He left a sequence. He was particular. The word held irritation and leftover love. He took a breath, then offered me a folded business card creased across the middle. A lawyer's name, Patrick Lynn, and a handwritten number on the back. Daniel told me to call him if anything happened, Ethan said. But he said you had to decide first. I studied Ethan, the scuffed boots, the careful posture, the way his jaw tightened when he stood near the pictures. He loved Naomi. He had loved Daniel, too, in the way sons love complicated men, with inventory and edits and an ache shaped like a door that never opens the whole way. What do you want from me? I asked. He didn't rehearse. The truth, he said. And whatever safety he meant when he built this. He gestured at the evidence like a contractor asked to finish a cathedral with salvage wood. I thought of Jenna leaning on my kitchen island, asking to square a loan that apparently paid for something I didn't want to imagine. I thought of strangers at the memorial calling Daniel capable while a second set of flowers bloomed in photos I had never seen. Safety, Daniel style, might be a lever disguised as a life raft. I closed the velvet box and slid it into my pocket. The emerald knocked once against my phone, a small, decisive sound. We'll open the vault, I said, more to myself than to him. But not alone. Ethan nodded, relieved but cautious. Good, he said. He didn't want you walking into anything by yourself. I locked the roll-up door and felt the weight of the keyrings settle unfamiliar in my hand. We stepped into the cold, the gulls loud over the cracked pavement, the air tasting like pennies and choices. The unit behind us held its breath. The emerald wasn't jewelry. It was a password. And I had just agreed to type it one letter at a time. I set the emerald on Monica's coffee table like it might detonate. The stone threw a cold green line across the wood. Monica didn't touch it. She sat close, knees angled toward me, the way you sit beside someone who's almost falling, but not ready to be caught. I told her about the storage bay, the wall of photos, the laughing man I married who looked younger in jeans I'd never seen. I told her about Naomi, about Ethan, about the draft will with a company name that sounded like a shipping label for sins. I told her about the medical report, how he knew his heart was failing and chose string lights and secret dinners anyway. While I spoke, Monica's face went still in that strong, quiet way she has when someone is bleeding. Not dramatic. Competent. She poured tea we didn't drink. She said I wasn't stupid. She said he curated a life, and I believed what was curated for me. That's not love's failure, she added softly. That's deception's talent. The sentence sat between us like a small light, and I let it warm my hands. Then I stood. Because if I stopped moving, I would rust. Jenna's condo smelled like a boutique, citrus and money and something sharp. The building had a lobby with a sculpture that pretended to be casual. I rode the elevator watching myself in the stainless steel and practiced not shaking. I didn't knock. I used the key she gave me years ago, back when we were sisters who borrowed sweaters and stories. Inside, everything was new. New couch. New rug. New art that looked expensive because it didn't try. On a console, a framed photo froze time, Jenna and Daniel clinking champagne in a crowded room, heads tipped together like a duet. I stared until my vision narrowed. My chair at that party was empty because I'd had a cold. Or so the story went. She breezed from the bedroom wearing a dress the color of blush and victory. You should have texted, she said, and kissed the air near my cheek. Her eyes swept me hair, hands, the tiny tremor I couldn't hide. She offered wine out of habit, then remembered and poured sparkling water over ice, the cubes chiming like applause. I put the glass down untouched. I found the unit, I said. My voice surprised me, calmer than it felt. The photos. Naomi. Ethan. The shell companies. There's a draft will. Your name is not the surprise you think. She tried a laugh that didn't land. You're grieving, she said. People say things. You'll hear. Not other people, I cut in. Him. His handwriting. His evidence. His second life with dates and captions. Silence rearranged the room. She leaned on the counter like it was a podium. The perfume reached me in a wave, sweet then sour. He fronted me money, she said again, smaller now. He was generous that way. And thorough, I said. There's a trust mentioned. For a child. Her mouth shaped a bright O, as if she'd been handed her cue. She placed a hand low on her stomach. Then I guess you should hear it from me, she said, and her eyes locked on mine the way a driver watches a light go yellow. I'm 12 weeks. It's his. The room tilted 5 degrees. The refrigerator motor started and stopped. Somewhere 3 floors down, a dog barked twice. I could count my breaths now. That felt like progress. You were sleeping with my husband, I heard myself say. The sentence sounded borrowed from a different show. She didn't flinch. He came to me when he needed to breathe, she said. When your house was too curated. The word was deliberate. She tasted it like candy. My hand moved before my reasons did. The slap wasn't loud, but it was honest. Her head turned, her lip opened. A tiny dot of red bloomed, and then decided to stay. She touched it, surprised, then smiled without humor. You hit me, she said, almost pleased. You must really love him. I loved the man I thought existed, I said. I'm still looking for him. She straightened. The mask returned, silk over wire. Andrea, this baby is family, she said, voice smoothing into a tone that sells houses and apologies. Your blood. Your parents' legacy. Don't punish a child because you're hurt. There it was, the clean pivot to moral high ground. Smart. Effective. Ugly. I will honor whatever he wrote for the child, I said, each word placed where it could be found later. A trust, a share, fine. But not for you. Not $1 that props up a lie you helped build. Her eyes chilled. She stepped closer, belly forward, shoulders back. You can't prove anything about me, she whispered. You can't prove what he promised, or what he did, or what you think I did. That last clause hung strange. I think, I said slowly, you did exactly what you needed to secure your future. The line landed between us like a glass we both refused to pick up. She laughed, small and mean. You were always the rule follower, she said. He wanted oxygen. I gave it to him. Don't be shocked that he breathed. I closed my fist around the pendant in my pocket. The emerald dug into my palm, hard and specific. This isn't a negotiation, I said. It's an exit interview. Her face flickered. She reached for a cloth to dab the smear on her lip, then looked back at me with the serene cruelty of someone who believes time is on her side. You'll come around, she said. You're practical. You like order. Money is order. I walked to the door. He left me something better than money, I said, and watched her eyes sharpen at the word left. He left me choices. In the hallway, the air felt cooler, cleaner, less performed. I stood with my forehead against the elevator wall until the metal leached the heat from my skin. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Ethan, you okay? I wrote back, not yet. Tomorrow, vault. When the doors opened, I saw my reflection again. Same face. New edges. The pendant's chain clicked softly as I walked, a tiny metronome counting down to the next key. Would you have walked away then, or would you keep opening doors? I chose the door with the heavy lock and the desert art behind it. The emerald in my hand felt less like jewelry now and more like consent. The elevator chimed at 32 and opened onto glass and quiet. Cold art in warm light. A lobby that smelled like lemon cleaner and paper money. Ethan's badge kissed the reader, soft beep, turnstile unlocked. Monica walked on my left, a half-step closer than etiquette, like a handrail dressed as a friend. Daniel's satellite office sat at the end of a beige corridor, door frosted with his firm's logo, my name nowhere. Inside, staged austerity. A desk with nothing on it. Shelves with bound reports that hadn't been read twice. No family photos. No Friday flowers. Even the air felt temporary, like a rental agreement. Ethan moved straight to a large abstract painting, desert colors poured into geometry. Here, he said, almost apologizing. He slid it left along a hidden track. Behind the canvas, a steel panel waited with a keypad and a palm plate. The panel looked pleased with itself. I set my hand on my pocket. The emerald pressed a cool circle against my palm, as if waking. I snapped the clasp and found the seam I'd felt last night. A tiny catch yielded to pressure and revealed a wafer-thin strip of metal tucked inside, etched with 6 numbers. My breath stuttered. He had told me to wear the password to our marriage. Would you have opened it then? I asked myself and typed. The keypad blinked green. The palm plate warmed under my skin. A lock thudded behind the wall, heavy, certain. Ethan exhaled, relieved and angry in the same breath. Monica watched the hallway through the glass, shoulders squared as if doors could smell fear. The safe swung open on oiled hinges, polite as a butler. Inside, tidy stacks. Contracts with tabs. Transfer ledgers marked in black and blue. A slim black flash drive taped under a shelf edge with a strip of gaffer tape, the kind you use when you plan for gravity. A small wooden box. A silver key tagged Heritage First Bank, box 319. The neatness made my teeth ache. I took the wooden box first. It weighed almost nothing. Inside lay a gold ring with a delicate halo, the band engraved with a single letter, N. The stone wasn't large. It didn't need to be. It had the quiet confidence of a choice already made. I pictured Naomi's hands, camera strap, coffee mug, wind. The ring winked once in the office light, and then went still. Monica touched my elbow. I put the box back and reached for the folder marked Orion. Page after page of clean ownerships hid inside the usual corporate fog, logistics contracts, shipping manifests, nominee directors with faces I'd pass without seeing. Money moved like tidewater, out, around, back. Daniel hadn't just lied, he had engineered an ecosystem. Ethan found a thick envelope sealed with a dab of red wax I recognized from our holiday cards. He turned it over, read the front, and went still. My name. Only my name. He handed it to me like it might burn his fingerprints. I broke the seal and unfolded the letter. Daniel's handwriting was steady, the same block letters that labeled our Christmas bins and this double life. The first line made my grip tighten. Andrea. I built 2 houses and slept in both. That wasn't love. It was fear dressed up as capability. I told myself I kept you separate to keep you safe. Truth. I kept control. I am sorry. I won't ask forgiveness I don't deserve. I read on. He admitted to Orion, to the offshore scaffolding, to the way he used kindness as camouflage. He wrote about Naomi without poetry, which made it hurt more. He wrote about Ethan with pride that cut like glass. He wrote about his diagnosis, how the doctor gave him a map, and he still drove toward the cliff. He wrote that he had bought the ring for Naomi and kept it a week in his desk. He never gave it. The day he tried, everything went dark. "You choose what survives me," he wrote. "Hide it and live. Use it and burn it all down. Either way, do it on your terms. If you want answers I could never speak, go to Samuel Green. He holds a sealed envelope. He was the only one who ever told me the truth to my face. He will give it only if you and Ethan stand there together." My throat closed at that. He had tied us with a knot we could cut only as a pair. I passed the letter to Monica. She read quickly, jaw flexing once, then slid it back to me like a verdict. "He's handing you the steering wheel," she said, low. "You drove this marriage blind." "Not anymore." We inventoried the safe with method instead of emotion. Contracts photographed. Transfer records scanned with Ethan's pocket device, small, gray, precise. I pocketed the flash drive and tried not to feel its temperature. The silver bank key chimed against my ring of household lies. I set aside a thin folder labeled Pike, Contingency, and didn't open it. Some teeth can wait. On Daniel's desk, a single drawer held a pistol-shaped hole where a phone should be. No dust ring. He had taken it with him, or someone had come after. The desk smelled like lemon and ozone. Time here was scrubbed for fingerprints. I stood at the window that looked down into the lobby. People drifted through the art like weather. Outside, Norfolk wore its winter with practice, flat light, hard wind, birds carving the sky. I touched the emerald, then the ring box, then the bank key, then the letter. For points on a compass I hadn't agreed to navigate. "Next?" Ethan asked. Not impatient, just ready to move. "Bank," I said. "And a lawyer." My voice found that steady, low-register grief had carved into me. "Daniel's, then mine." Monica nodded. "We do copies first. We control pace. We don't let anyone else set the clock." She had become the tempo of my courage. I slid the painting back. The safe clicked home. The office returned to its staged emptiness, as if nothing had happened and something enormous hadn't started. At the door, I reread the last line of the letter. "Do it on your terms." The words settled on my tongue like medicine that tastes worse than the illness. My phone thrummed once in my pocket, unknown number, no voicemail, silence after. I let it go dark. Not yet. We stepped into the hall. The elevator whispered up. Somewhere below, a lobby phone began to ring, bright and insistent, as if the building itself had news. I closed my fingers around the silver key and the emerald's hidden code, and I chose something Daniel never did. I chose to decide. The first call found me in the parking garage, wind scraping concrete. Unknown number. A pause, then a man's breath measured like a metronome. He introduced himself as Harold Bishop, a former colleague who believed I had documents that belonged to him. His voice wore a suit. It never raised itself, it didn't need to. I told him he was mistaken. He told me mistakes get corrected in unpleasant ways. He used the word belong like it came with teeth. I watched my reflection in the car window hold still. Monica listened on speaker, arms folded, eyes on the ramp. When he finished his careful warning, I hung up and let the silence check me for fractures. "Would you have called back?" The second call arrived before the adrenaline faded. Smoother voice. London vowels smoothed by boarding schools and expensive whiskey. Leonard Pike, he used the name freely, like a key card that opened every door. He said he was the primary investor behind Daniel's ventures and required the prompt return of company property. He gave me a deadline end of the week and offered discretion if I complied. I pictured a leather office and framed maps with pins in cities that never sleep. "I have nothing of yours," I said. Calm. Precise. He promised consequences shaped like men who didn't announce themselves. I ended the call and slid the phone into my pocket next to the emerald. The stone felt colder now, as if it understood the weather. Ethan texted, "We should move." I wrote, "Samuel Green." Today. Monica drove. Norfolk blurred into interstate, The flat winter sky laid like tin across miles of brown trees. Every so often I tested my breathing and found it present. Ethan rode in back, eyes on the shoulder, scanning mirrors the way people do when they've lived around threat. The car smelled like coffee and wet wool. I gave myself 3 exits to rehearse what we'd say to a man Daniel had trusted with a sealed envelope and a condition: both of us or nothing. Richmond wore ivy like memory. Samuel's townhome sat on a narrow street where brick learned to be elegant. A brass knocker shaped like a lion tapped twice under my hand. The door opened as if it had been waiting. He knew us without introduction. "Andrea," he said, and then, "Ethan." Not surprised. Not relieved. Just ready. He was the age where men retire from work but not from opinions, wiry, alert, academic neatness softened by a cardigan that had earned its elbows. The entries smelled like paper and tea. He led us to a small book-lined room, closed the door, and sat with the posture of someone who used to grade people for a living. He spoke first. "Daniel left a packet for you," he said, "to be opened only if you both appeared." He anticipated debate. The corner of his mouth twitched, not humor, not grief. Familiarity. He retrieved a long manila envelope from a drawer and placed it on the table between us. Red wax sealed the flap, pressed with the same small stamp Daniel used on holiday cards, a pine cone on snow we never saw. Samuel didn't touch the seal. He folded his hands and looked at the two of us the way a surgeon looks at a family. "Before you open that," he said, "you should understand 2 things. 1, Daniel loved control more than safety. 2, he knew it." He slid a pen across the table. I broke the wax. Inside, a note in Daniel's careful block letters and a document folded with lawyerly confidence. I read the note first. It didn't ask forgiveness. It confirmed what we already knew: Orion, the shell companies, the 2 calendars. It also carried an instruction: if you choose to protect yourselves, use what's in the bank box last. If you choose to fight, start with Pike. He's the hinge. I unfolded the document and felt the air change. A revised will, witnessed and dated after the draft Ethan had shown me. Several provisions leapt forward, the kind that rearrange families. A trust, 30% of Daniel's hidden personal savings, allocated to the unborn child of Jenna Cole, accessible only at 21. Interim control vested in a neutral trustee, not Jenna. Disbursements allowed for health, housing, and education, but expressly barred for parental lifestyle maintenance. Jenna's access, none. Oversight, strict. Language, iron. Monica let out a small breath through her nose, the kind sound people make when pain and relief collide. Ethan leaned closer, jaw tight, eyes narrowed. Samuel nodded once, as if a theorem had just proven itself. Daniel had anticipated her pregnancy. He had locked the baby's future behind doors she couldn't open with a smile or a threat. He had paid for his sin with money instead of truth. I didn't know whether to hate him less or more. There were other notes. A list of accounts that existed to be closed. A short paragraph about Naomi, written without ornament. She did not deserve any of this. If she were alive, I would have chosen differently sooner. My throat burned. I folded the page before the sentence cut deeper. Samuel poured tea that tasted like bergamot and advice. He told us Daniel had visited him 2 months before he died, asking for a quick estate revision and a sealed safeguard. Samuel had argued, Daniel had insisted, the envelope had been sealed with the condition we had fulfilled today. Daniel was brilliant and cowardly in equal measure, Samuel said, not unkindly. He didn't fix his moral failure. He managed it. He looked at me, then at Ethan. You can choose a different verb. On the street outside, a delivery truck groaned. Somewhere in the kitchen, a timer chimed and went quiet. I felt the clock inside me pick up. End of the week. Harold's threat like a shadow in a doorway. Leonard's smooth voice offering ruin with manners. What would you do if you were me? I asked Samuel, breaking my own rule about opinions. He smiled, sad and proud at once. I was Daniel's friend, he said. I am not his defense attorney. Use leverage. Document everything. Copy before you confront. And never meet a man like Pike without an exit he can't see. We left with the envelope repacked, the will scanned on Samuel's old flatbed for redundancy, and a copy saved to Ethan's encrypted drive. On the sidewalk, the air felt colder, as if the city had pulled its coat tight. Monica took the envelope and tucked it under her jacket as if it were an organ donation. On the drive back, my phone lit up with a new text from an unknown number. TikTok. 2 words, black on white, clean as a scalpel. I stared until the screen went dark and showed my face again, same eyes, steadier mouth. I thought of Jenna's hand on her belly, of the ring with an N, of Naomi's laugh preserved on matte paper. I thought of a child who hadn't asked for any of this and a man who wrote locks into his love. Then I looked at the silver key on my chain, the one labeled Heritage First Bank, and felt the shape of momentum. Tomorrow, I said, not to anyone in particular. We go underground. The car hummed. The road unspooled. Somewhere behind us, a clock kept someone else's time. I closed my fingers around the emerald, felt the etched numbers against my skin, and let the countdown begin. The vault manager slid a shallow metal tray across the counter like a ritual. Identification, he asked, polite, bored, trained. The room smelled like old paper and cold metal. He checked my driver's license twice, then compared the silver key to a list and nodded. Box 319, he said, almost to himself. Hasn't been accessed in years. Years. The word ran a finger down my spine. We followed him down into the belly where time keeps its money voice. The corridor was quiet enough to hear your own pulse edit itself. He fitted a master key, stepped back, and let me finish the turn. The lock surrendered with a clean, adult click. He left us in a private booth with a felt pad and a chair no one ever really used. Monica stood in the doorway. Ethan closed the curtain like a stagehand readying the scene. I lifted the lid. Inside lay a single manila folder and a glossy photograph. Not clutter. Not greed. Curation. The photo came first, as if it insisted. Daniel stood in afternoon sun beside a black SUV, looking younger than the last year had any right to allow. Ethan was at his shoulder, same grin, same easy stance. On the other side, 2 men bracketed them with investor comfort. Harold Bishop, jaw tight, eyes amused, and Leonard Pike, handsome in a way that expects gratitude. All 4 looked like a solved problem. Proof of proximity, Monica said under her breath. Frameable leverage. The folder wore a label in Daniel's steady hand, insurance. Inside, tabbed packets arranged themselves like teeth. Shell company registrations with addresses that didn't exist in the cheerful daylight. Signed payoff records, tidy as gift receipts. A short dossier titled Pike, contingency, dates, wire paths, 3 notarized affidavits, and 2 photographs of Leonard accepting things that don't pay taxes. The evidence didn't shout. It hummed at a frequency only the guilty can hear. Would you have closed the lid and walked away? We didn't. We itemized. Monica read titles. Ethan scanned documents with a palm-sized device that looked like a toy and performed like a scalpel. I photographed each page, timestamping the images and sending them to a clean cloud that Patrick Lynn would set up within the hour. We worked without speaking much. I could feel the shape of fear in the room, but I could also feel something new threading through it. Agency. Back on the surface, Winter scraped the street with a metal brush. We carried copies in 3 separate envelopes, one for Patrick, one for Samuel's flatbed later, one for a place no one would ever think to look. The original went back into the box. The lid shut with a weight that felt like a decision. Patrick Lynn's office smelled like toner and discipline. He didn't waste expressions. He listened, eyes steady, and only then laid out a plan as if he had drafted it in another life and left it in a drawer marked break glass. Preserve. Duplicate. Escrow, he said, tapping the desk softly with each verb. He scanned the contingency file himself, saved it to an encrypted case vault, and wrote names of regulators on a yellow pad the way a conductor writes crescendos. He recommended a letter to Harold, formal, defensive, full of teeth wrapped in stationery. He drafted it in 5 minutes. I signed with a hand that no longer shook. The letter left by courier. Harold called before the envelope could cool in his outbox. His voice sounded like a room with no windows. He said the materials were stolen. He said I was obstructing. He said men he knew did not use the courts first. I let him build his little scaffold. Then I kicked it one plank. I have documented evidence tied to Orion, I said, keeping my tone interior quiet. If you contact me or anyone near me again, I press send to tax authorities and a reporter who hates the word offshore. Your choice. Monica watched me as if I were walking a beam. Ethan mouthed, good. Harold paused, one breath too. Then he found his phone's red button and used it like a door. Patrick didn't smile. He noted the time, the caller ID, the threat, and sent himself an email titled Contemporaneous. He was the kind of man who teaches the future who to believe. We made copies of the copies. One lived in Patrick's fireproof drawer. One went on a drive sealed in an envelope under Monica's name. One traveled home with me inside a grocery bag under a carton of eggs. Safety can look ridiculous. That's why it works. Leonard called it sunset. His tone was velvet with a knife underneath. He apologized for Harold's tone. He respected my loss. He offered assistance with complex wind-downs if I returned what he politely called sensitive corporate materials. He gave me an email that sounded like a concierge at a hotel where rooms cost more than cars. I let him speak until the rhythm of his confidence exposed where to cut. I don't own a company, I said softly. I don't need a reputation. I don't sell logistics. I'm a widow with nothing left for you to damage. Silence. It had texture. I pressed. I have enough to explain your weekends in Zurich and your Tuesday accounts in the Caymans, I added. If you push me, I don't lose anything. You do. He inhaled once, slowly, the way a man does when he moves from charm to math. Surely we can be reasonable, he said, easing the words like a hand under a glass about to fall. Reasonable, I repeated, tasting it. Reasonable is you stop contacting me. Reasonable is you consider what happens when men with badges read your contingency file. Another pause. He thanked me for my time. He didn't say goodbye. Patrick lifted one eyebrow. You were clear, he said. Clarity shortens arguments. We left after dark with a packet of instructions, passwords, escrow notes, emergency triggers. Patrick insisted on one more step. Redundancy saves lives, he said. He walked us to the building's basement and opened a storage room lined with bankers' boxes. A safe crouched in the corner, ugly and certain. We put a sealed thumb drive inside under a file labeled janitorial. He logged it on a sheet no one would read unless someone needed to swear an oath later. In Monica's driveway, the cold carried a smell like iron. We split. Ethan took one set of copies to a place he wouldn't say out loud. Monica tucked another packet under a stack of recipe binders in a kitchen drawer, then moved the binders to the back of a cabinet no guest would ever open. I slipped my envelope into a hollow behind a loose baseboard in my hallway, a space Daniel once used to hide birthday gifts. Old habits. New stakes. My phone buzzed as I turned out the living room light. A message from an unknown number. Last chance to do the right thing. No signature. No need. I stared at the words until they looked cheap. I set my own last chance on the coffee table, a small black flash drive we hadn't yet touched. The one taped under the vault shelf. The one Daniel left for after you decide. It sat there like a fuse still wrapped in plastic. Tomorrow, I told the empty room. We see what he couldn't say. The house held its breath. Outside, a car idled 2 blocks down, then moved on. I slid the emerald from my neck and felt lighter by an ounce and heavier by a mile. The drive waited, patient as truth. Would you open it alone, or ask someone to watch you do it? I texted Ethan and Monica, morning. My place. Bring calm hands. The countdown didn't tick anymore. It hummed. Monica's porch creaked under our weight as we lifted the planter. Cold dirt took our fingerprints without complaint. We slid a flat envelope, copies of the worst pages, into the hollow under the terracotta lip, then tamped soil back like a secret. Ethan pressed the rim and listened for wobble. None. The night smelled like pine cleaner and winter. Somewhere a wind chime counted the breeze in small, nervous notes. 2 days later, we met at my kitchen table at noon, as if daylight could make the truth safer. The laptop fan hummed like a small animal. The flash drive sat in my palm, weightless and heavy. I plugged it in, watched the icon appear, AE_last. One file. Date stamp. 11 days before he fell in our bathroom, and I learned what silence weighs. I clicked. Daniel filled the screen, closer than I wanted. He filmed himself in that sterile office, same glass, same desert painting. His face had lost its practice light. The tired lived deeper than his eyes. It lived in his posture, in the way his shoulders guarded his heart. He wore a gray shirt I knew and a voice I didn't. Andrea, he began, and the word unstitched something I had sutured shut. If you're seeing this. I ran out of edits. He didn't dress it up. He admitted the architecture, Orion, the calendar split, the way kindness made an excellent mask. He said I wasn't the person he most wanted to deceive. I was the one he tried, too late to protect. He rubbed his chest once, absent and human, then forced his hands flat on the desk so the camera could see control. He warned me about Harold, cold patience, and Pike, warm threat. He said Samuel would open the envelope only if Ethan stood beside me. He said Patrick Lynn was the kind of lawyer who wrote reality down so it couldn't pretend later. He spoke in lists because lists had saved him from feeling for years. Then his voice changed. There is someone you trust more than you should, he said, and for the first time he looked ashamed instead of sorry. Jenna. The name reached across the table and took my pulse. Ethan leaned back, jaw hard. Monica went very still, the way a lake goes still before a storm crosses it. He told the camera what I didn't want to hear. He had ended it. She wouldn't end it. She got pregnant on purpose after he tried to leave, he said, and then threatened to walk into the light with his offshore accounts if he stayed gone. He called it leverage, not love. He used her name without adjectives, like an indictment read by a tired judge. If the truth wore my sister's smile, I thought, would you keep watching? He did. He swallowed, glanced off camera, then came back with a smaller voice. Naomi's crash wasn't clean, he said. The sentence opened a trapdoor I didn't know stood under my feet. He spoke of the car, a single vehicle slide on a dry night. Brakes that failed after a service. A mechanic's note that made no sense unless someone replaced something with nothing. He could not prove it. He suspected Jenna knew she was pregnant that week. Naomi had told him she was leaving the country. I don't have evidence, he said, only the pattern of a woman who wanted guarantees. He took a breath like a man lifting a safe. You have two choices, he said, switching back to the language of plans because feeling had endangered his voice. Walk away with what I tried to leave you. Or fight. If you fight, do it with allies and paper, not rage. Use leverage. Use Pike first. Never meet Harold alone. Don't confront Jenna without an exit she can't see. He looked down once, then straight at me. I am sorry, he said. Not a performance. A verdict. I don't deserve forgiveness. I do want you to be free. The video ended the way lives often do, mid-breath, mid-thought, a hand reaching to turn off the camera and failing to beat the cut. The screen fell to black and showed us our faces. Mine looked older and steadier. Ethan's held a grief shaped like a blade he would rather not use. Monica's eyes were wet and hard at the same time, two opposite weathers sharing a sky. No one spoke first. The fridge clicked on and off. A gull drifted past the window and scolded the air for being empty. I forced my hands to open, fingers printed with soil from the planter we'd used as a vault. The evidence on the table didn't pulse. I did. Monica finally moved, touching the laptop lid without closing it. We don't give this to anyone yet, she said. Copies, then a vault. The dead man's switch Patrick planned, we write it down in your hand. She was all rails and guardrails. Ethan nodded once, a soldier in a war he didn't enlist for. We keep this nuclear, he said. Only if they light a match. I thought about Naomi's hands, the ring I had put back in a wooden box, the way Daniel said her name with no decoration and all the consequence. I thought about Jenna's perfume cutting the air in my kitchen, about her palm on her belly like an argument she thought I couldn't answer. The ache I'd been calling grief shifted into something with a skeleton. We made 3 copies of the file, one encrypted under Patrick's care, one under Samuel's old machine, one under a name no one would search inside a folder called Longcare. I wrote a letter in my own hand for Patrick. If I die, or if I disappear, Forward everything to the reporter he recommended and a list of agencies that hate shell companies more than they love golf. Then I did what Daniel told me not to do. I stood and walked to the sink and watched the neighbor's maple lean into the wind, and I let rage pass through me without arguing with it. It didn't take long. It never does when you call things by their names. I dried my hands and set the flash drive on the table again. It looked smaller now. Smaller and loaded. We don't tell Jenna, I said. We invite her. Monica's head turned sharply, then settled. Where? She asked. My porch, I said. Warm hell with iced tea. I smile. I mention the accounts. I let her think I'm choosing mercy. Then I put the weight on her and walk. Ethan flinched at walk, but he didn't argue. He knew exactly what kind of walking I meant, the kind that drags truth behind it like a net and leaves a clean wake. The phone buzzed on cue, as if a playwright were cruel and punctual. Jenna, Sunday brunch? I want us okay. The words were sugar and lime. I typed back, perfect. Monica's place at noon. A heart emoji went unanswered. We packed the copies. We reset the table as if nothing had been planned here. Evidence hides well under normal. Before he left, Ethan looked at the screen one last time and touched the space where his father's face had been, the way a man touches a closed door he's decided not to knock on again. When the house emptied, I sat with the emerald pendant in my palm, feeling the tiny seam against my skin. Daniel had worn control like a suit. He died in it. I was done wearing anything he had fitted for me. Sunday would be polite. My anger would not be. I would set the table, pour the tea, and place the truth like cutlery. Then I would choose the only thing he asked me to choose. I would leave the lie. Monica set out iced tea and a plate of careful sandwiches. Her porch wore Sunday light like a white shirt. Wind moved the chimes in small, good noises. I chose the chair with my back to the rail, the one that let me watch the walkway. The flash drive sat on the table, dark and patient, a punctuation mark that meant don't interrupt. Jenna arrived late, as if victory could set the clock. Her dress announced the pregnancy before her mouth did. She pressed my hands, smiled at Monica like a hostess, and began with words about family, healing, and moving forward. I let them float past and fade like perfume. I poured tea. We should be honest, I said. No more edits. Her smile held, but her eyes checked the exits. I mentioned Orion in a tone soft enough to feel safe. I described how pressure isn't love, how a threat isn't devotion. I told her there's a trust for the baby, strict, clean, untouchable, and that I would honor it without discussion or delay. I left her name out of that sentence on purpose. She tried patience. You're hurt, she said, voice sugar smooth. We can fix this. I placed the flash drive between us. We won't fix anything, I said. We'll know things. I told her Daniel documented what mattered. Offshore patterns. Friendly investors. A car that didn't break after a service. He didn't prove it. He left a pattern and a camera that didn't look away. The porch went quiet in a new way. Monica's fingers tightened around her glass and then released. Jenna's mouth thinned. She called it rumors. She called it grief. She called it unfair to bring a dead man into a conversation he couldn't finish. I let each label fall. Then I told her the only sentence I had rehearsed. I'm not going to court, I said. I'm not chasing you. I'm walking away. Her eyes flickered relief and confusion, trying to share the same space. So you're done? She leaned forward, belly first, hands folded like she was preparing to bless me. I'm done with the lie, I said. And with you. I nodded at the drive. If I'm harmed or if I vanish, it goes to a list of people who enjoy daylight. Until then, it sleeps. She sat back, recalculating. You won't win anything, she said, discovering she had no other script. You'll be alone. I've been alone for a while, I said. It didn't sound like a complaint. It sounded like inventory. She stared at the drive as if it might blink. Then she stood, smoothed the dress at her hips, and arranged her face into something the world would call brave. I wish you peace, she said, and walked down the steps with that particular grace some people use when they believe the future owes them interest. We listened to the chimes count her out. Monica reached for my hand and didn't speak, which is how love behaves when words would bruise. Inside, we wrote what Patrick required in my handwriting. If I die or disappear, release all materials to the names on the list. I sealed the letter. Monica drove me to Patrick's office. He read it once, nodded once, and slid the envelope into a drawer that locked with a sound I trusted. On the way out, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, understood. No signature. No need. Leonard learned to be quiet. Harold stopped calling. Silence can be compliance when leverage sits on a desk wearing a paper clip. I met Ethan at the storage bay that evening. We didn't turn on the fluorescent lights. Dusk did the work for us, gentler on the hard edges. I handed him the small wooden box with the ring marked N. Not my decision to keep, I said. He closed his hand around it and nodded without looking up. We stood with our griefs side by side long enough for them to recognize each other. I left him there with the maps and the calendars and whatever goodbye he needed to say. I went home and folded my life into a single suitcase. Clothes that breathe, a pot for coffee, a photo of me at 20 standing on a pier and laughing at something forgotten, Samuel's number, Patrick's card, a hiking map I didn't own yet. I took the emerald pendant from its chain, pried out the thin strip with the code, and slipped the stone into a drawer for the next owner to discover as just a pretty thing. Some passwords deserve retirement. Would you have stayed to fight longer, or chosen the quiet victory no one applauds? I turned the townhouse key in the lock and set it on the counter. I walked through each room once, letting memory get small. The lilies on the table had curled at their edges and sweetened past dignity. I carried them to the trash and didn't look back. The drive west was a slow unspooling of old roads. Virginia's gray gave way to larger skies and the kind of silence that comes with distance. I slept at small places with honest sheets and left early. When the mountains lifted on the horizon like a new thought, I felt my ribs make room. Oregon greeted me with air that tasted like pine and rain. I rented a small place near the trailheads, a porch barely big enough for a chair and a stubborn fern. The landlord handed me 2 keys and didn't ask questions. On my first Friday, I bought flowers for myself, tulips, just opening, and set them on a kitchen counter that didn't remember me. I called Samuel to say I landed. I thanked Patrick and confirmed the triggers. I sent Monica a photo of the view and wrote, "I am okay." It was true enough to say out loud. I asked Ethan, "Do you need anything?" He sent back a single word, "Time." I understood. Time is the only truth that doesn't need a witness. The days learn new shapes. Mornings began with a cheap mug and a ridgeline. Afternoons, I walked until the noise inside me tired out and lay down. I learned which grocery clerk likes to talk about birds. I learned that a body can carry sorrow and still climb. I learned my voice without an audience. Some nights I dreamed of Naomi's laugh in those matte photos and a porch with string lights where no one lied. Some mornings I woke with a steady heart. On the second Friday, I bought dahlias. On the third, white roses. I set them in water and didn't wonder who they were for. They were for the woman who decided. The flash drive lives in a bank box with a number I can save from memory and never need. The letter with Patrick sleeps under his calm hand. Jenna has a trust she can't touch and a child who will one day read their own name on papers that belong to them. Harold has a new hobby called minding his business. Leonard has calendars with fewer pins. I kept one thing from the old house, a clock that blinked 6:30 p.m. like a habit. I plugged it in and watched it fail to find the signal. Then I set it by hand. I don't wait for anyone's return anymore. I meet myself. I didn't win back what I lost. I became someone who doesn't need it.